Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The second largest bank failure in U.S. history is bringing up bad memories of the last financial crisis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The Justice Department is now investigating what caused the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. KPBS reporter MG Perez has more on the aftermath.
There is a bank on just about every block of this community of business buildings near UTC. But it's the bank in this building at 4370 La Jolla Village Drive that is cause for concern after its collapse. This morning, security guards blocked sidewalk access to the Silicon Valley Bank branch here. Even account holders at other banks are worried about what's happened.
I think we all worry, and it makes me think about the debt ceiling and how it needs to get raised. And it just makes me hope that the people in Washington would do their job and stop fighting.
While withdrawing money from the ATM at lunchtime, there are several opinions being dispensed as well.
It's a possibility that I'm not able to get it out. I mean, it's only $36, but I mean, just the thought that I may not be able to get it out based on what the bank is doing with my money.
They allow bankers to make investments that are not proper, but interest rates are at zero, so they can get away with it. But when interest rates get back to normal, then they pay the price, and then it ultimately comes back to the people.
The failure of Silicon Valley Bank, even with federal funding and security, is a familiar story to the U.S. economy. 2008 was not so long ago, as we hear from someone who was in the middle of that financial collapse.
It was a very turbulent and terrifying time.
Corinne Hoare was Director of Communications for the Office of Management and Budget in the second Bush White House. She was responsible for working with Congress members as a liaison to President Bush, then communicating a message of reassurance to the country, much like she says is happening at this moment.
That is certainly on everybody's mind, and President Biden, the White House, Treasury, and the FDIC is putting measures in place to really prevent any kind of contagion from spreading to other small and mid-sized banks.
They're making money off of our money. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's a bad thing because it's a business, but at the end of the day, you have to really educate yourself about banks.
Trust takes time to build back better. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Today is Equal Pay Day, marking how far into the year women have to work to earn what men made the previous 12 months. KPBS reporter Claire Strong has a look at what's being done here in San Diego to try to bridge the gender wage gap.
2 months and 14 days. That's how long the pay gap is this year. One reason behind the disparity is that women are often forced to take unpaid leave to care for children and relatives. And a lack of affordable childcare is only making things worse.
We don't have enough quality childcare for working families, working parents. And what we do have is very expensive, especially for infants. So those two things, family leave, paid family leave, and childcare infrastructure would make a huge deal in allowing women to not have to take as much time off work to provide care.
The Pew Research Center estimates women earn just 82% of what men make. But San Diego nonprofit Greater Than Tech is trying to change that.
And we were working.
In addition to introducing young girls to the world of STEM and business, they're also teaching them something arguably more important: how to advocate for themselves.
A lot of times, especially women, when we get to corporate spaces, we are the least likely to negotiate our actual pay. So we're starting them off at a younger age where we can be their first interaction where they're learning how to negotiate their rates. And their statement of work, so they feel more comfortable asking for more money.
The wage gap between men and women hasn't improved much in over 2 decades, and women of colour are hit the hardest. Dr. Brittany Wheeler from Greater Than Tech thinks having strong working female role models is essential for other women.
We're not used to seeing this in the workplace or even growing up with our parents. It's 9 times out of 10, you have to break that cycle and really make the uncommon common. So I feel like we don't see it because we're not used to it. But it's up to us as girls to say, no, we can do the same thing as men.
Pay Equity Day may have started back in 1996, but depressingly for women, it's still a thing in 2023. Claire Strong, KPBS News.
KPBS is working on stories for Women's History Month, and we have one coming up a bit later. Meet a woman whose sewing shop in Barrio Logan is getting attention from some global brands and what it says about her style of fashion. Rideshare companies are celebrating a decision upholding Proposition 22, the measure allowing drivers to be classified as independent contractors. But union leaders say it's not good for workers. Here's KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado.
A court of appeals ruled that app-based rideshare drivers will continue to be independent contractors. That's what Californians wanted when they passed Proposition 22 in 2020. Rideshare and delivery companies like Uber and Lyft poured millions into the Prop 22 campaign. They threatened to leave the state if it didn't pass, saying it would be impossible to do business in California. Uber's chief legal officer said the ruling is a victory and they're pleased the court respected the will of the people. Prop 22 was the response to Assembly Bill 5, which required companies to classify rideshare drivers as employees with benefits.
We were devastated on behalf of workers throughout California.
Former Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher wrote AB 5, but now she's the leader of the California Labor Federation. She's disappointed with the ruling.
In doing so, the appeals court decided to stand with powerful corporations like Uber and Lyft over the needs of everyday workers.
We spoke with several rideshare drivers who said they voted for the proposition and now regret it. None of them would say so on the record for fear of getting in trouble.
We know that this is part of the system and that the system's broken. So we vow to continue to fight and to make sure that every worker has the protections of basic labor law.
The Service Employees International Union is expected to appeal the ruling to the state Supreme Court. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Another rainy night is expected, and that means some extra spaces available at local homeless shelters. There are 3 locations where people can go tonight. All are in the downtown San Diego area, and those include the Joan Kroc Center at Father Joe's Villages, Living Water Church of the Nazarene, and San Diego Rescue Mission. Check-in times, the number of beds available, and the type of people served varies by location. A new app allows San Diego County social workers to quickly find available shelter beds for those who need them. KPBS reporter Alexander Wynn explains how it works.
Right now, much of the work social workers do to connect unhoused people to shelters is decidedly low-tech.
They are resorting to sticky notes.
And often it comes down to calling the right person.
There is absolutely nothing that informs them in real time about the availability of suitable, humane, safe shelter that meets that person's needs.
The app proposed by the DA's office seeks to change that. It will function much like a hotel booking app. Shelters will input the numbers of beds they have available and the services they provide. Officials are hoping this will be an easy access one-stop shop for available shelter beds in the county.
We believe that this proposed technology will not only provide shelter and in a humane and suited way to the individual, but it will always inform our county in a transparent manner as to what our needs are and what is missing.
The DA's office designed the app after spending 2 days last November brainstorming with service providers, experts, and the task force on homelessness. Today, the County Board of Supervisors approved $10 million for the DA's office to build and implement the app. It is expected to be ready in 6 months.
This is the type of, transformational change that we need in the county to reduce the time and the minutes required to make sure that we get people connected to appropriate shelter beds in San Diego.
This is part of an overall effort by the county to tackle the homelessness crisis. The next phase would be for unhoused people and people about to experience homelessness to use the app to find available shelters. Homeless advocates Michael McDonald says it's a good idea, but doubts that it would do much to solve the homelessness crisis.
But unfortunately, this is almost the cart before the horse. We don't have those resources to actually fill up with the live bodies. So I'm not sure how technology is going to magically make that appear.
Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
It's day 2 of President Joe Biden's latest trip to Southern California. This morning, he wrapped up his overnight stay in San Diego. The president met with armed forces at North Island Naval Air Station before leaving town. This afternoon, Biden spoke in Monterey Park, shifting his attention to gun violence. 11 people were killed in a mass shooting there in January. President Biden took the opportunity to talk more about an executive order signed today to promote background checks.
This executive order helps keep firearms out of dangerous hands. As I continue to call on Congress to require background checks for all firearm sales. Second thing it does, the executive order ramps up our efforts to hold the gun industry accountable. It's the only outfit you can't sue these days. It does that by calling out for an independent government study that analyzes and exposes how gun manufacturers aggressively market firearms to civilians, especially minors.
President Biden also called on Congress to ban the sale of assault weapons. However, that's unlikely to happen due to Republicans controlling the House of Representatives. And KPBS covered President Biden's visit to San Diego on all platforms. One way to stay up to date is by subscribing to KPBS newsletters. Breaking news, daily headlines, arts and culture, and more are available based on your interests. You can sign up at kpbs.org. Oceanside Unified is closing an elementary school that the district says is literally on dangerous ground. KPBS North County reporter Sonia Thorne says the decision came at the end of an emotional meeting.
Parents pleaded with the Oceanside Unified School District Board to keep Reynolds Elementary School open.
As you can see and feel, there's a lot of passion and heart in this room, and that is reflective of our community at Reynolds. There is so much heart and passion for our school and our scholars.
We stand before you now knowing you are faced to make a choice and hold all the power over our kids, our amazing teachers, and incredible staff that make Reynolds our second home.
We can't do that to our kids. That's traumatizing. That affects them in every level to which they are already being traumatized. Everything that's gone through them. Let's put our children first, please.
Despite comment after comment in support of keeping Reynolds Elementary School open, the school board voted to close the school at the end of the school year. The closure comes after engineers planning to renovate the school found soil liquefaction happening on the property. During an earthquake, that could make the building sink. The news was a blow for parents who were excited for the renovation. Some parents asked for more time to review the 176-page report released late last week.
I do know it is not right for you to release the full geotechnical report 2 days before this meeting for no independent review. That's not right. There are independent scientists within this community that would like to go through every single last bit of that report.
And your report isn't even in Spanish or accessible to the community. And I asked for it when I came in. You really? I have to say this. When I came in, I asked for the report to the people at the front, and they told me they didn't know where I could access it. That's unacceptable. Do you have copies of the report here for people? Thank you.
Engineers did present mitigation options, but any mitigation would still require all students to move off campus for 3 to 4 years. Board President Raquel Alvarez said for her, the decision came down to safety.
I don't want to worry that a student would get hurt because of something, because they fall into a hole because it's the start of a sinkhole or and they trip on something, or the building just shifts just enough and so they trip and then they hit their heads or something.
Ashley Gerdo is a Reynolds Elementary School parent.
No, tonight we weren't here to ask for them to remodel or not remodel. We were here to ask for more time. A decision, for them to place 566 children in a couple months' time is not enough time for us to debrief our children, for us to get mental health in order for our children, for us to get transportation and after-school programming in order for our children. It's just not enough time. So I don't know.
Another special board meeting will be held on March 23rd to discuss the plan to relocate staff and students. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
The Justice Department is suing Rite Aid for allegedly violating the Controlled Substances Act and contributing to the opioid epidemic. The lawsuit alleges that from May 2014 to June 2019, Rite Aid knowingly filled unlawful prescriptions for controlled substances with red flags, and that included excessive quantities of drugs like oxycodone and fentanyl. The complaint also accuses Rite Aid of intentionally deleting internal notes about suspicious prescribers. NASA is launching a satellite to measure air pollution in real time. It's called tropospheric emissions, or TEMPO for short. In April, NASA will launch the satellite in partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Through summer and fall, the TEMPO team will take air quality measurements over Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. California officials are considering how to best manage the underwater parks strung out along the state's coast. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says a gathering in Monterey will help shape the future of marine protected areas.
Officials were looking for ways to revitalize California's underwater habitats and fisheries at the end of the last century. Their solution was the 1999 Marine Life Protection Act, which completely or partially protected about 16% of the state's coastal ecosystems. It is an effort that's largely succeeded.
We've got proof of concept. We can show that we can be the fourth biggest economy in the world in California, have protective, strong regulations in our ocean, and be successful in doing both.
There are 11 marine protected areas along the San Diego coast, scattered between Carlsbad and the international border. A review covering the past decade found that the underwater reserves have largely delivered on the promise to revitalize ocean habitats.
MPAs allow us to have these designated areas that are able to support lots of life at every level, and that includes these large fish having lots of babies to repopulate.
A recently signed international treaty is calling for 30% of the world's open oceans to become protected areas by 2030. That could put pressure on California to expand the state's marine reserve system. Officials will probably discuss that possibility, but it's more likely they'll focus on managing existing reserves.
Some of that could be in changing boundaries or levels of take within our existing marine protected area network, but that's what we'll be prioritizing in this process.
State officials, researchers, and stakeholders will talk in Monterey Wednesday about the marine system, and those discussions will help shape how the reserves are managed and maintained over the next 10 years. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Thanks for tuning in. Let's start you off, though, with your weather headlines, because we have a lot of weather that we're talking about. We have a potent storm brewing in the Pacific that's bringing heavy rain across the Golden States, including Southern California. That's going to up the risk for flooding. And as we head into the end of the week, a quieter weather pattern follows, but we just have to get through these next few days. We do have a flood watch in effect through Riverside County, including also Orange County as well, Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday afternoon. That's where we have our highest risk of flooding, which is why there is a flood watch in effect. We also have some wind advisories in those areas, as well as it is going to be blustery through Wednesday night. Now tonight around San Diego Metro, we're still seeing some periods of rain with a low of 58. Now, a wider look at the region, we're dropping down to the 50s from Oceanside to San Diego, even towards Ramona, and then in the 40s in Mount Laguna, dropping down to a low of 41. Now, if we time this out, though, in Futurecast, what we're dealing with late Tuesday into early Wednesday, that's when we have that nice fresh batch of moisture, some heavier rain embedded within the system. It's going to be training over that area for a few hours, so that's going to increase that risk for localized flooding as well, especially around San Diego, and then as we head towards the mountainous regions. And we're not going to start to dry out until during the afternoon on Wednesday. Now, tomorrow's forecast, again, we're starting off very rainy in areas like San Diego, coming down towards Chula Vista, Ramona, and then Mount Laguna seeing some showers as well, which is the high of 44, but staying in the 60s along the coast for the week. Again, rainy for Wednesday, Thursday. We dry out for a quick bit with rain and drizzle possible on Friday with a high of 62, but drier for the weekend. More inland, though, we start to see that rain push in. It's going to stick around through the beginning of the weekend, but we're staying in the 60s. Now, closer to the mountains, we're dealing with that rain tapering off throughout your day on Wednesday, staying in the upper 30s, low 40s for the most part, with a shower possible Friday, a damp morning on Saturday. Closer to the deserts, though, a passing shower possible for the early weekend, but overall, not feeling too bad in the upper 60s, low 70s. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
The past year of meetings, training, practices, and games came down to this week for the SDSU men's basketball team. Today, the men's team held their final practice before heading to their first stop in the tournament. A game Thursday in Orlando against Charleston. And if they win, they'll play Saturday for a spot in the Sweet 16. The SDSU women's basketball team is also playing in the postseason. They'll have home court advantage for the first round of the women's NIT tournament. Tip-off is set for 6 Friday night at Viejas Arena. Wave FC are announcing another addition to the team. Goalkeeper Lauren Brisky is originally from Southern California, growing up in San Clemente, actually. Most recently, she was part of UCLA's national championship team last year. She was drafted 33rd overall by the Wave in January's draft. Wave FC begins its second season here in San Diego, March 25th at Snapdragon Stadium. A little sewing shop in Barrio Logan launched the dreams of an entrepreneur. As part of our Women's History Month coverage, KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado introduces us to the woman behind a lifestyle brand called So Loca.
On this colorful street in Barrio Logan, you'll find a little sewing shop called So Loca. And once that roll-up door goes up, you never know what fashion designer Claudia Rodriguez Bezensky is up to. Today is a quiet day to create or recreate. You see, everything here is made out of fabric that was once something else, something she calls slow fashion.
This blanket is now trash because it has a hole. Like, how can we add like something cool so people could now be interested in it again?
Sustainable fashion is something we hear a lot about these days.
Coming from a family where it's like there was a lot of us, you know, I'm one of 6 kids, you know, it was really difficult for my mom to be able to like afford things. And so, you know, she would take us to like the Forever 21 and she would be like, what do you like here? This. And then she's like, let's go home and make it. And you're like, I want it here though. We would go thrifting. I would buy jeans and cut them up and turn them into something else. And so really like the cultural part of like recycling has always been one of my things.
When she moved to San Diego, she just went for her dream. And So Loca, the brand, was born.
I've always kind of had like that really like punk rock like style and all that. And so everyone would always be like, you're so crazy, you're so crazy. And so when we decided to open up the business, we were like, we should call it So Loca. And my husband was like, oh my God, that's such a great idea.
She's built a brand making one-of-a-kind wearable art inspired by her rich cultural heritage and Chicano identity. a combination of Mexican and American.
People would kind of look at us a certain kind of way because we were speaking Spanish. I struggled with that a lot, you know. When I went to Guadalajara to go to the ranch where my parents grew up, you know, I was like, I'm Mexican. And my cousins are like, you're American. And I was like, what? And so, like, that sense of, like, not being able to belong.
And her bestseller combines the Catholic symbol she says was everywhere growing up in the San Fernando Valley and resonates with people like her.
Even though some people might not be religious, they still utilize the Virgencita as like a cultural image. And so for me, like putting like phrases across, like we have some that say like Morena, we have some that say brown AF, putting it like on a shirt. I want people to feel like, yes, I'm brown, and you know, and I feel very proud of that.
She's become quite the entrepreneur and part of a collective that helps promote other female artists and businesses. She even hosts her own show.
Especially like being a woman and a brown woman, you know, in business, like how could we uplift each other?
In October, Nike came calling.
This high school dropout is here at Nike. Gonna talk to a bunch of designers, so imagine how I feel. I'm gonna cry.
She says her life could have easily gone down the wrong path if she hadn't believed and worked hard to build her dream.
For me, sewing, I feel like it saved my life. You know, like I was a troubled youth, I was like headed into like the wrong direction, and it gave me self-worth because I could make things, and that made me feel special.
She can now proudly say that crazy Chicana punk rocker from the Valley did good. She credits everyone from her abuelita, father, mother, brothers and sisters, but especially the community from Barrio Logan, a community that embraced her, who she compares to pieces of fabric, because much like her art,
you're basically able to sew things together and keep them like strong. And I think that that's community, right?
It takes a lot of people to become a large, colorful quilt. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Biden signs an executive order aimed at expanding background checks for gun sales. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.